Okay, we are in Daf Samach Daled Amid Beis, and we saw a machlokas in the Mishnah in regards to if one of the karbanos, one of the two goats dies. So we saw that in the first set there would be two goats. One would be the girl would designate Lashem, and one La'azazel, and one of them dies. So in the scenario where the one that was going to go La'azazel out to the desert died, so the Mishnah said you're going to bring another pair and do the lottery, and whichever one the lottery designates as La'azazel, so that's going to be the replacement. And then you're going to have two upon which the lottery, the Goro designated Lashem as the korban. So which one are you going to bring as a korban? So Rav and Rabbi Yochanan, Rav being the head of the academy in Bavel, and Rabbi Yochanan the head of the academy in Eretz Yisrael. Rav said that you're going to the original one is going to be the one that you're going to bring as the korban, and the second one is going to go into special pasture out into until it gets replenished. Whereas Rabbi Yochanan says the other way around. No, the first one is going to go out to pasture, and the second one is the one that's going to be brought as a korban. And the basis for this, the Gemara explained, is the concept of that a korban, balei chayim, a live korban, while it's still live and viable as a korban, whether it's kivush nidcha yidcha, once it becomes invalidated, doesn't remain invalidated, or can it come back if whatever the reason for its invalidation goes away? That's step number one. So in our Mishnah, we had seen, and so the Gemara said that in our Mishnah, the text, the wording of our Mishnah indicates like Rav, that the original one is the one that's going to be brought as a korban because it says that the other one, the original Kiddukai remains as is. Remains as is seems to indicate that it is brought as a korban the way it was going to be brought. The meaning that our Mishnah indicates that we say kibbutz nidche, even though that it was pushed aside, its chayzav and nireh can come back and be a valid korban. So even though that when its pair died, you can't bring it as a korban yet, it can come back to being valid. Whereas the brisa indicates like Rabbi Yochanan. In the brisa, it indicates that you would bring the second one and the first one is not valid. Tanan, in our Mishnah, and now the Gemara is going to bring the text of our Mishnah with our Mishnah. At the end of the Mishnah has a machlokas. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with our Mishnah. In our Mishnah, it said the other one is going to go into special pasture because it's not brought as a korban. And then when it gets a blemish, you're going to sell it off and you're going to sell it off and bring a gift korban. And now the Gemara, the Mishnah itself addresses. Now, no, this is a sin offering, a chatas. And generally, we have a rule that a chatas offering that becomes invalidated because the owner already has atonement, or because the owner died. Then the halacha is like it. Then the halacha is that chatas she'izkapra balel is mesa. This chamish chatos mesas. 5 scenarios within which a chatas, a sin offering, would have to be left for dead and not go into pasture and sold and another korban brought with its value. So why over here do we have that you're going to put it into pasture, let it get a blemish, be sold off? So the Gemara answers, and the Mishnah says, because she'ein chatas tzibur mesa. This for a communal chatas, there is no such special rule of it becoming of it dying. Of being left for dead. Um, this Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with. And Rabbi Yehuda says, Thomas, it actually is left for dead, and it doesn't go into a special pasture where it gets a blemish, and then it gets sold and another carbon ball. And then Rabbi Yehuda says, and I'll tell you even more. And this the Gemara is going to address what is this even more, and what does he say? But here's what Rabbi Yehuda gives as a scenario for more. Nishbach hadam, if the blood of the shechted carbon is going to Nishbach hadam, if the blood of the carbon is nishbach, it spills, and so now you can't. It's not that the one carbon died; it's that the one carbon became invalid because the blood spilled. Then yamas hameshalech. In that case, also the goat that is meant to be sent out into the desert is going to be left for dead because it's going to be invalid. So Rabbi Yehuda disagrees in 2 points. Point number one, he disagrees, and he says, this that you say that it's that the hair of the one that died is going to go into special pasture, and from that you're going to let it get a blemish, sold off, buy a new carbon. No, that's not the case. You have to leave it for dead. It's totally invalid. Number two, he says, and not only if you had the two goats and one died, the other one has to be left for dead. But even if you started the one carbon, you shechted it, and you have the blood in the bowl, it's ready to go. You did part of its mitzvah already, and then you spill the blood. The next one is going to, the next one, meaning the pair that's supposed to go into the desert, is going to be left for dead and invalid. So Tanan, and the Gemara now is going to address it. So we begin on Samach Dalet Amud Beis, about 10 lines in. Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda says furthermore, Nishbach hadam, if the blood in the bowl of the goat, that's the carbon, it spills, Yomas HaMishtaleach, then the Mishtaleach, the one that's supposed to be sent into the desert, is left for dead. It can't be valid carbon. Mesa Mishtaleach, the one that's sent that is meant to be sent out into the desert, dies. Yishkafich Adam, the blood which is already in the bowl of a valid carbon that was shechted properly, must be spilled out. Now, what we see is that he holds that Balei Chayim, living animals, become invalidated, because he says that by spilling by mistake the blood in the bowl of the first goat, the second goat is going to be totally invalid and it has to be left for dead. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, this makes sense that even a living animal can become invalidated, and once it's invalidated, it remains invalid. That's why the pair, the one that's supposed to go out into the desert, must be left for dead, because after all, it is the mishtaleach, the one that's sent out, is a pair of one that became invalidated. It is invalid. And according to Rav, it says that a living animal, even if it became invalidated momentarily, it still becomes valid once that reason goes away. So why is the one that is meant to go into the desert, why does that have to be left for dead? So Rav admits, he says, of course. And when I said my halacha, it's in the beginning of the Mishnah, that the first part of the Mishnah, which disagrees with Rabbi Yehuda, the Chachamim, there, and it says that the one is going to be sent into pasture and says that it remains valid. That's why I'm talking about that. Since the Chachamim disagree with Rabbi Yehuda, they say that a living animal does not become invalidated. Ali Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rabbi Yehuda, let Kakamina. Of course, I'm not going to say it according to him. He clearly holds the Balei Chayim Nidachim, that even a living animal becomes invalidated. Ki Amina. When did I say my opinion? I'll leave it to Rabbana. in the explanation of the beginning of the Mishnah, the opinion of the Rabbanan, where they say that the animal is not left for dead, but rather goes into the special pasture to get a blemish and they get sold off and the carbon is bought from it. And according to the Chachamim also, that they're going to say that as long as the animal is alive and now the invalidation is removed because you found that a new pair, it's going to be okay. Now the Gemara goes the other way around. Bishlam el Rav ba'apli. According to Rav, we understand why Rabbi Yehuda the Chachamim disagree, because Rabbi Yehuda holds balachayim nidachim, living animals can become invalidated, and the Chachamim disagree and say living animals cannot become invalidated. Rabbi Yehuda ba'apli, Rabbi Yehuda Rabbanan. Elo Rabbi Yochanan, but according to Rabbi Yochanan, what's the basis of the machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbanan? After all, according to the Rabbanan, also a living animal becomes invalidated. So why does Rabbi Yehuda say that it's left for dead? Why does the Chachamim say it goes to special pasture? And why? And either way, they're not. The old pair is not valid. Amar Rava Hamrinan. Well, you can't ask a question from our Mishnah, our Rabbi Yochanan. We already said our Mishnah indicates like Rav. The Brisa is what indicates like Rabbi Yochanan. So in our Mishnah, going back to our Mishnah, in the Chachamim's explanation, that opinion, that we had a pair of two goats, right? One died, the other one is still alive. We're going to bring a new pair, and in the explanation of Rav, we're going to bring in a new pair, do the lottery, and then take the one and pair it up with the other one that's still there, and the original one plus the new one are going to be the ones that we actively use, and the additional pair, the extra, is going to go into special pasture. Meaning, we have set A, 1 and 2. 1 goes Lashem, 2 goes Lazazel. And then at 2A, the first pair, the second goat, dies. So now we have 1A, the first pair, A, and then number 1, meaning the one that was designated Lashem. That's alive. We bring in a new pair, pair 2, pair B also has a 1 and 2. And the 1 and 2, 1 is Lashem, 2 is Lazazel. Now we need to replace the one going Lazazel, so B2 becomes A2, and now we have a pair of A. And B1, the second pair, the one that was designated Lashem, that's extra, and according to Rav, that's the one that goes into special pasture. However, Rabbi Yochanan disagrees. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, we're just going to take the second set entirely as the ones we're using. The one that goes to the desert is the second one. That's the replacement one for dead. And the first, and the one designated Lashem also, because that's the new set. And the original one designated Lashem, which is still alive, that's the one that's going to go into special pasture, because once it's been invalidated, it remains invalid. That's the way Rabbi Yochanan says it. So now the Gemara is going to ask, in our Mishnah it said, the reason it goes into special pasture and doesn't die, and it doesn't go and isn't left for dead, is because ein tanan she'ein chatas tzibur mesa. Because a communal korban, even though that it's a sin offering, a communal korban does not have to be left for dead. You can put it into pasture, get a blemish, sell it, and buy a new korban with it. Hadi yachid ki'agavne mesa. But what you're saying is that in such a scenario, if it was a personal korban, it would indeed be left for dead. It would have to die. Now, Bishlam Rabbi Yochanan, so according to Rabbi Yochanan, that would make sense. That says that in our Mishnah, it's the original one that becomes invalidated. So that's going to be good, according to Rabbi Abba. What is Rabbi Abba? Rabbi Abba's scenario is it goes into the heart of the problem or the issue that comes up with a chatas that is duplicate. that we have an extra chatas. Here's a scenario. Typically, what happens is somebody designates and needs to bring a chatas offering, a sin offering. He designates a carbon. That carbon gets lost. So he brings a different carbon. A few days after he brings the carbon, he finds the original carbon. All right? Now, it's chatas that sheniskapru balel. It's a chatas offering that the owner who's obligated to bring that chatas offering already has a atonement that happened from another carbon. The carbon is complete. So this has no use anymore. It's a carbon that chatas that has no use, and so it's left for dead. However, what about the scenario where he finds the original carbon while the first carbon is still alive? So he designates a second carbon. Before he gets a chance to actually bring it to Yerushalayim and to bring it as a carbon, the next one shows up. The original one shows up. So now the question is, what does he do with the original one, or in such a scenario? So Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. So Rabbi says he can use whichever one he wants, and the other one, whichever one he didn't use, has to be left for dead, because it's a karba, it's a chatas sheniskapru balel that the owner already has an atonement. Whereas the chachamim disagree, and he said no. At this point, the owner does not have an atonement. They're both worthy of carbon at the time that the carbon is being brought, and therefore neither of them need to be. Both of them are valid, right? Both of them are valid at the same time. Therefore, it could go into special passion. So Rabbi Abba explains what scenarios are we talking about, and he says that everybody agrees that he used the original one, the second one, meaning the one that he had designated, the substitute one. That's all right, thank you. If he had used the substitute one, that the one that was originally lost has to be left for dead, because that one was invalidated. The substitute was used, so the original one is left for dead. The only question is, if you use the original one, what's the second one? The second one was never meant as a proper karba chatas. It was always a substitute. So therefore, it never became invalidated, and therefore he says it does not have to be left for dead. It could go into special passion. So in our scenario, where he used, according to Rabbi Yochanan, he's using the second, he's using the substitute. So the original one remains invalid, and therefore, if not for it being a communal carbon, because it's a communal carbon, it's not gonna, it doesn't die, it goes into special pasture. That's what our Mishnah says. But if it were a personal carbon, then indeed, as a personal carbon, that's a chatas, that it was the original and not the substitute. The original not being used would have had to be left for dead. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan. So we can explain our Mishnah according to Rabbi Yochanan, according to the opinion of Rabbi Abba. Could the Rabbi Abba Amarab, like Rabbi Abba said in the name of Rav, the Amar Rabbi Abba Amarab is Rabbi Abba said in the name of Rav, and now we go to 65a, Samachem and Aleph, Hakol Moedim, everybody agrees, Shem Neskaper v'She'ein Avuda, that in this scenario of a regular chatas, not on Yom Kippur, a regular chatas offering, where he had lost his original one, placed the substitute, finds the original one, and decides to use the substitute as his main carbon, Avuda Mesa, that the original one that had gone lost is, even though that now he found it, it would have to be left for dead and cannot be used as a carbon. So in our scenario, that's our Mishnah, and that's why the Mishnah has to explain that since this is a communal carbon, it's not left for dead, because indeed, if it was an individual's person's carbon, it would be left for dead. According to Rav, but according to Rav, where he says that that in our Mishnah, he's actually using the original one. So since he's using the original, the substitute was never meant as it's not a lost carbon. It's something that was never meant other than to be a substitute for a chatas. You have the original chatas. The second one is not a chatas and a skapru b'aleh, a chatas which the owner already has atonement because it was never meant as anything other than a replacement, and therefore it should be left for special pasture to get a blemish and replaced, even if it was an individual's carbon. So for sure, if it was a communal carbon, why does the Mishnah have to tell us? Oh, you know why this is not left for dead? That it goes into special pasture because it's a communal carbon. Actually, according to Rav, even if it was not a communal carbon, even if it was a personal carbon, the halacha is that it would go into special pasture. So why does our Mishnah say that the reason this one gets a blemish and gets sold and you purchase with its funds another carbon is because it's a communal carbon? Actually, even if it was a personal carbon, it would also be the same. Rabbi Shai said, it's like somebody donating originally. Somebody's obligated in a sin offering. And he says, you know what? I'm afraid I'm going to lose one, or one of them may not be valid. I'm dedicating 2 karbanos. I'm donating 2 animals for my chatas. In case one is no good, I have a replacement. I have an achrayus. I have a guaranteed one. Since originally that was the intent of its donation, then he can use either one, and the other one goes into special pasture. It doesn't have to be left for them. So when it says, Rav Savalak Rabbi Yossi, so we say, since Rav follows the opinion of Rabbi Yossi that the mitzvah is to take the first one, the mitzvah Marisha, he has to take the first one. He has to use the first one. So when he's donating and consecrating the second pair, the number one of the second pair, the one that's from the start never going to be used because we have an existing valid carbon, which it's a mitzvah to use that existing original carbon. It's as if he's donating this with the intent of it being wasted and lost, and therefore Rav is going to say that even in a personal carbon, this would be left for them. Tanan, it says that we learned in our Mishnah of Yehuda Eimer Thomas. Rabbi Yehuda says no, it's left for dead. That according to Rabbi Yochanan, it says that it's the original one that's invalidated and the original one that's not used because once it was invalidated, it remains invalid, and therefore he says it goes into special pasture and as a communal carbon. Rabbi Yehuda says as an individual, even as a communal carbon, it's left for dead. Rabbi Yehuda Yamas and miskaper b'sheni shabazuk sheni, because he's getting atonement in the second one of the second one in the second pair, and it makes sense that the second one of the second pair is going to be the one that's going to be valid as atonement. Ela l'Rav, but according to Rav, the Amar Sheni Shabazuk Sheni Yira. But according to Rav, that says that the second one goes into pasture. L'Rav Yehuda Yamas. That means that according to Rabbi Yehuda, that's the one that's going to die. And Rabbi Yehuda, we already saw, says that the original one that became invalidated remains invalid. Well, then the minus got it. So what's he going to use as his atonement? The original one is invalidated. According to Rav, the second one, meaning one of set B, is going to be the one that's going to go to special pasture, to which Rabbi Yehuda says it has to be left for dead. Well, then you don't have any, number one, any lashems that are going to be an atonement offering. But my mikaper, what's he going to use as his atonement offering? Says, no, you make a mistake. You think Rabbi Yehuda is talking about the second one that's going to be meaning the leftover, the one of set B that he's going to use? No, Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Yehuda is going on the original one. In other words, Rabbi Yehuda that says that one is going to be left for dead is talking about the one that's actually the one he considers invalid. Rabbi Yehuda said that once a carbon is invalid, it remains invalid. Well, if that's the case, he's going to say that the original one is the one that's left for dead, because that's the one that became invalid and remains invalid. And the second one is going to be the one that's going to be the atonement. The one of pair B is going to be the one that's going to be the atonement offering. Rav, who says that he's using the original one, it's because he disagrees with Rabbi Yehuda. As he explained, he's explaining his opinion, not in Rabbi Yehuda, but in the Chachamim of the Mishnah. There are those that say that the question is asked the other way around. It's asked on Rabbi Yehuda. That Rabbi Yehuda said, and furthermore, if you already shechted the atonement offering, you already shechted the chatas, and the blood is in a bowl, ready to be spritzed in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies, it's ready to be spritzed, and then it spills, then its pair has to die, or vice versa. If the pair died, the blood is spilled out. Now, Bishlam Rav Reisha Pligi B'chatas Tzibur. So according to Rav, it makes sense that the beginning is talking about a communal carbon. The Sefer Pligi B'Balachai, and the end he's talking about whether a living animal can become invalidated or not. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, it's all the same concept of it being invalid from the start and remaining invalid. Kasha, indeed, that would be a question on Rabbi Yochanan. So to summarize this very complicated Gemara, in a personal korban chatas, sin offering, we have 5 scenarios within which if the owner is atoned for, or the owner dies and doesn't need the atonement anymore, or there's another carbon, whatever it is, there are five scenarios where the chatas is invalid as a carbon, and whereas in other things we say if it's invalid, just put it out into pasture, let it get a blemish, we'll sell it off, and we'll use the funds to replace it and buy a new carbon, a gift carbon. In chatas, there's halacha mishmasinai, that's not the case. 5 scenarios that a chatas, if it becomes invalidated, it just left alone to die on its own, and you can't replace it. You can't use its funds. You can't redeem it. However, there are some scenarios, such as a communal korban chatas, where even though that it is a sin offering, a chatas offering, as our Mishnah says, she'ein chatas tzibur mesa, a communal korban chatas does not have this obligation of the animal being left for dead. There, it does go into special pasture, and then it gets a blemish, it gets sold off, and you buy a new carbon. So, that being the case, in our Mishnah, that's what it says, that whichever one, either according to Rav, the original one is going to be used, and the second one is the one of set B is going to be put into special pasture and get a blemish. According to Rabbi Yochanan, it's the other way around. The original one became invalidated, remains invalid, and the second one is the one that's going to be used. And so the original one that became invalid is going to be put into special pasture and get a blemish. Our Mishnah said, and the reason for this is because it's a communal carbon. And as a communal carbon, it doesn't have to be left for dead. The question the Gemara asks is, that indicates that if it were a personal carbon, it would be left for dead, right? It would not go into special pasture to be redeemed after blemish and buy a new one. Now, why is that? And why not? Because it's true, if you find the original while after the person already got his atonement, it would be left for dead. But our scenario is that you have the 2 living karbanos side by side, meaning you had set A, one died, and the one is left alive. You bring in set B, one is alive, and that's going to be replacement for the one that's dead, and the other
is a competition. You have two atonement offerings standing side by side. You're going to choose the original according to Rav, and you're going to use the second one according to Rabbi Yochanan. Now, if you use the second one according to Rabbi Yochanan, it makes sense that the first one would be left for dead, because it's the original one that got invalidated, remains invalid. It's an invalid chatas, and that everybody agreed, according to Rabbi Abba, everybody agreed would be the equivalent scenario where the person lost his chatas offering, designates, consecrates another one, finds the original, and he's got two in front of him. If he uses the new one, the original one who had been lost is an invalidated carbon and is left for dead and not for blemish and to replace. So that would make sense. But according to Rav, who says that the original one is the one that became is the one that you're going to use, meaning the one that was designated from the start as a substitute. From the start, it was designated as a replacement. That, according to Rabbi Abba, the Chachamim would say it does not need to be left for dead, even as an individual's carbon. So why over here does the Mishnah say, since it's a communal carbon, it's not left for dead? Meaning, if it was a personal carbon, it would be left for dead. Why? It was only from the start a replacement carbon, and so it should be okay. So the Gemara makes this distinction, and this is crucial. In the scenario where I lost my one carbon, I consecrate another one, and then I find the original. When I consecrated the second one, I thought this is the one I'm going to be using, because I had the other one lost, and this one was going to be a valid carbon. In our scenario, we have the original carbon standing in the Beis HaMikdash waiting. I'm bringing in a new pair because I need a pair. I need to do a gorel, I need to do a lottery. So that's why I bring in a new pair. From the start, the one that's going to be consecrated Lashem was not going to be used. But it's never going to be a carbon. So it's originally from the start an avuda, a lost carbon. So that's from the start going to be, it's not a substitute. It never was a substitute. It was from the start an invalid carbon, and therefore it goes into special pasture and to be left for them. So that's the short of that Gemara.
That's the short version.
Yeah, that is complicated, very complicated halacha. Let's move on. Now, Rabbi Yehuda said, in our Mishnah, we said, if you had two animals, one died, the other one is our question. Rabbi Yehuda says, we don't even need that one die. It can be that you've already begun to do the carbon. You've already set shechted the one, that's a chatas, and then either it spills, so you have to leave the pair for dead, or the pair dies and you have to spill out the blood from the carbon that you already brought. So Gemara says, wait, now I get the second part. If the blood of the carbon spills, so you don't have a valid carbon now, so the pair is left for dead, because the mitzvah hasn't been done. But the other way around, where the living one that's waiting to go out into the desert dies, the one that's been shechted is a valid carbon. Why do you have to spill that out? The one that was left, its mitzvah was completely done. And here we have an interesting idea. What is the mitzvah of the goat that is sent out? We have several steps that have to happen on it. You need the lottery. Pronouncing it, this is the one that goes out lazaz. That's done by the Kohen Gadol in his white garments. The second step is that the Kohen Gadol is going to say vidui, is going to atone for Bnei Yisrael by stating the sins of Bnei Yisrael upon this goat. Also done by the Kohen Gadol in his white garments. Then someone else, Ish Iti, the man set beforehand to take this goat out, is going to take it and walk it miles into the desert and push it off the cliff. That's not done by the Kohen Gadol in his white garments. We've seen before, and we'll see again, that the only things that are a mitzvah on Yom Kippur, that if not done, invalidate the service are the necessary parts, meaning the parts that the Kohen Gadol himself must do in his white garments. So the lottery is included. The sending out to go to the desert is not included. If you miss that part, you never did it. It's not going to invalidate the service. It's going to be valid. So the only thing that is a question is the vidu. Is that necessary? And if not done, it's going to invalidate the carbon, or not necessary. And even if it wasn't done, it's going to be valid. Rabbi Yehuda is going to say, even if it wasn't done, it's going to be valid. Meaning the only thing that is necessary for this carbon to be done, and if not, it's invalid, is the lottery. And then once you've done the lottery on the goat that's supposed to be sent out, and you ignored that goat, for the rest of the day you didn't do anything with it, the service of Yom Kippur is going to be valid. So the Gemara now asks, Rabbi Yehuda says, the blood spill, the goat died after the lottery, you will now have to spill the blood. Why? Nothing happened. The carbon is completely valid. The one that's going to be sent out to the desert, everything that's absolutely necessary to have it happened, which is the lottery. So that's already done. The rest didn't happen. Okay, that's not going to validate the service. Why is spilling out a very good carbon that's already in process when just because the pair died, but the pair, whatever's absolutely necessary to do, is already done. Mesa mishtaleach, if the one that's supposed to go out into the desert died, amay yeshafech adam. The mitzvah and everything that's meant to happen was already done. So Rabbi Yanai says, yes, that's true. But there's one obligation the Torah says, which is not that there's another mitzvah to do, but the Torah says it must remain alive until the atonement is done. It should stand alive before Hashem for the atonement, which tells us that until the atonement, which is the spritzing of the blood under the Mizbeach, until that moment, it must be standing alive. And if it died beforehand, the entire thing is invalid. How long does it have to remain alive? Until the atonement, which is the spritzing of the blood of its pair, of its partner. Tanan Hasan. We learned over there, and this is in regards to the shekel. We're going to try and compare other halachas to this. We learned that in Shkolim, that every city would gather up the half shekel from all its members, take the collection box, send it with a messenger to Yerushalayim. Those funds were going to the collection boxes, and from there they would bring the karbanos. And this way, everybody was a partner in the communal karban. What happens if on the way there was a highway robbery and the money was robbed or lost? So Tanan Hasan learned over there. Here, members of a particular city, they sent their collection of shekel. And it was either robbed or lost. Now, the Beis Hamikdash didn't find out about this robbery or getting lost. And so they collected all of the collection from the donation boxes. And when they do so, they would say, any lost or unknown lost or robbed money that we don't know about is included in this donation. So, Nitruma Truma, if the collection had already been collected by the time the messenger arrives at Yerushalayim, so the messenger now has to take an oath. In the Beis Hamikdash, holding the Sefer Torah, he takes an oath to the collection officer, saying, "I did not steal it. It was not negligent," and that's it. And that fulfills the obligation of the community because the collection was done on their behalf as well. The im lav, however, if by the time they arrive in Yerushalayim, the collection has not been done yet, so now it's a known loss. Prior to that, so that's not covered, and then they have the messenger has to go back to his city folk and tell them, "I'm sorry that this robbery happened. I'm sorry this money was lost. It was not by my negligence." Takes an oath. He takes an oath to the city people, And now they're obligated in a replacement tax because the funds never arrived. And the Mishnah over there explains, if after that, subsequent to the community, then replacing those funds, they now find the original funds, being that those were also donated to the Beis HaMikdash, they cannot be redeemed, so they also have to go to Beis HaMikdash, and they paid a double tax that year. And they can't use it for the next year either. And this is the key that we're looking at. The donation of this year cannot be used for a future year. These are donations for this year's fund. This is the donation for this year's carbon. The fund is used for the daily carbonas that are brought on behalf of the community. It's used for the communal offerings in the Beis HaMikdash. They have to represent everybody in the community. And so the fiscal year of the Beis HaMikdash is this year. It goes for this year's fund. It cannot be used for next year. And then the Gemara, based on this, is going to talk about why don't we just leave this carbon for next year? Why do we have to leave it for dead or sell it off in a special pasture? Just leave this goat for next year's Yom Kippur. The Gemara is going to deal with that based on this idea, which we'll see tomorrow, this question and concept. When do we say that this year's carbon donation fund offering can be used in the future, and when